we have a fantastic panel for this today. We are, some of the speakers this morning mentioned that we cannot do this alone. Of course not. So we need partnerships, we need collaboration, and in this sense, ADB is very pleased to co-organize this session with our SEADS partners, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia area, Save the Children, Generation.org, and the Jakarta Post, and to have with us in the panel today, Google.org and AVPN. It is now my honor to invite our keynote speaker, Deputy Minister for Gender Equality at the Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection in Indonesia, Excellency Leni Rosalin, for her keynote remarks. Excellency Rosalin, the floor is yours.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, climate change is recognized as one of the most complex, multifaceted, and severe threats of humanity. Guided by the common but differentiated responsibilities and capabilities, the actual response to the climate challenge is determined by the ability of individual countries to adapt or build resilience to a changing climate, while contributing to the global greenhouse gas mitigation effort. With women making up almost half of the world population, the transition to net zero must be gender responsive, inclusive, and promote women's economic empowerment. Despite being disproportionately impacted by climate change, women also tend to hold solutions. Women have been championing climate mitigation and adaptation efforts from the grassroots levels to the global negotiation table. However, since the number of women in the climate negotiation table is scarce, empowering women in villages at grassroots level becomes essential. By creating women champions at the village level, it means creating a strong family and community backbone that can empower herself, her children, her family, and the community where she is. Empowering women in the village means preserving local wisdom and good traditions that have been passed down from generation to generation and have a positive impact on the environment. Thus, empowered women are fundamental to the pursuit of an equitable, sustainable, and prosperous future for all. That's why Indonesia, since a couple years ago, have initiated a holistic and integrated program called Women and Child-Friendly Villages. Piloting have been done and cover all provinces and 2 districts in every province and 2 villages in every district. Because we have more than 74,000 villages in Indonesia. In today's world, climate change continues to be one of the most significant forces in shaping future workforces. Without targeted support, there is the potential for women to be left behind in the transition to a net zero economy. This challenge is even more severe because usually the role of women is often not considered in actions related to climate change mitigation that is considered to be male-dominated. This is exacerbated by the fact that there are still many parties who believe that transition to net zero is only related to climate mitigation sectors and tend to ignore the importance of increasing resilience in terms of climate change adaptation. When we look at the net zero transition, we will see an increase in demand for the skills in energy transition and transportation sector, forestry and land use sector, and marine and fisheries sectors. We should also see an increasing need to strengthen resilience through climate adaptation efforts that contribute to a net zero transition. These sectors are likely to play a crucial role in determining access to new green jobs. In Indonesia, recognition of women's role in net zero transition is gradually increasing. The decarbonization strategy carried out by, for example, the State Electricity Company By gradually stopping the construction and operation of the existing steam power plant to increase the development of new and renewable energy, has involved women at every stage and is using gender perspective. In the transportation sector, the number of female workers is only 5% of the total number of workers in the sector. But in recent years, there has been an increase in the number of female bus, taxi, and ride-hailing drivers, as well as female pilots. This is just some examples. In social forestry, the role of women is slowly gaining recognition, although the total number is still small. Out of the 1 million household heads registered as social forestry managers, only around 13% are women. In marine and fisheries sector, the role of women as fishermen has also begun to be officially recognized, with around 8% of female fishermen already registered and holding fisherman cards. This figure is still lower than the number of women registered in fish cultivation and salt ponds, which are around 10%. In agriculture, women have contributed as a pillar of food security and have been involved in managing food storage, with the number of female farmers of approximately only 40%. These examples show that men are currently significantly better placed than women to take advantage of the new green job opportunities arising from the transition, as the occupation expected to see largest net job gains are all heavily male-dominated. Without any intervention, job opportunities created by the net zero transition will not be spread evenly between men and women. This risks further widening existing gender inequalities in the labor market. Ladies and gentlemen, to increase women's prospects in accessing these new green jobs, interventions must be taken to support women in gaining the relevant skills that includes encouraging girls and women to uptake science, technology, engineering, and mathematics or STEM subjects in vocational school and higher education. Unfortunately, gap in access to and enrollment in STEM of women and girls remain high, not only in Indonesia, but also globally, including in the ASEAN region. UNESCO reported only 30% female students choose a STEM field of study in higher education globally. In ASEAN, less than 23% women participated in engineering higher education. UNESCO also stated less than 19% of employment contracts in STEM fields are carried out by women. In Indonesia, women and girls' participation in higher education in STEM is relatively high. In some fields, such as biology and pharmacy, women dominated to more than 80% participation. In other fields, women and girls' participation is also relatively high, such as 73% in medical, 87% in chemistry, and 58% in mathematics. Only in physics.
Recording in progress.
Only in physics that men dominated by 61% to women's 39%. Unfortunately, the number of women's participation declined when they entered the world of work. In the STEM industry in Indonesia, only 2 out of 10 women choose a professional career, and only 3 out of 10 women become researchers in the STEM fields. Furthermore, the role of Indonesian women in STEM research is 18%, which is significantly lower than the global number of 30% women researchers in science, technology, and innovation. ASEAN recorded gap between male and female labor force participation rate, with 82% for the total male population and 67% for the total female population in the ASEAN countries. The female labor force participation rate is significantly lower in STEM-related sectors. So as in Indonesia, the same picture. The gender gap on labor force participation rate is quite high, with 80% for female and 53% for female. The STEM gender gap, or commonly explained as a leaky pipeline problem, where women leave STEM fields in increasing numbers over time, must be addressed promptly and collaboratively. Whether in education or the workplace, the proportion of women in STEM decreases dramatically at the highest levels. Lack of women role models in STEM, both at university, vocational school, and in the workplace, as well as the low leaderships of women in energy transition, climate change adaptation, and economic production exacerbate these disparities. More women role models in STEM could help alleviate negative stereotypes and attract more girls and women into STEM fields and into green jobs. Family and community support for women and girls to study and work in STEM fields is very important. Ladies and gentlemen, the government of Indonesia continues to strengthen our commitment to improve gender equality and women empowerment in the STEM field, and to improve women and girls' financial literacy and digital literacy to increase women workforce participation. The Minister of Women Empowerment and Child Protection has stated during G20 Presidency 2022 last year that Indonesia is committed to oversee issues of gender gap in STEM and in green jobs at the global, regional, and national level. You could also see from the G20 Bali Leaders Declaration 2022. This commitment is in line with the mandate of the President of Republic of Indonesia to focus on the importance of considering the issues of just transition, gender equality, intergeneration, the needs of vulnerable groups and local community in implementing the country's low carbon and climate resilience strategy 2050, or we call LTS LCCR 2050. It is also in line with our Indonesia Long-Term Development Plan of 2025, Midterm Development Plan of 2020-2024, and our commitment on SDGs as well. Through this commitment, the government is supporting transformative campaigns to promote the profile of women as leaders in the STEM field, as well as conducting various women-led initiatives in the form of training and mentorship. The ministry also provided recognition to businesses that adopt gender equality practices so that they can inspire other companies to increase women participation, including in STEM-related green jobs. To achieve net zero future, the ministry also supported female-led businesses that make up more than 60% of the 65.4 million small-medium enterprises in the country. Understanding that the government cannot work alone, the ministry has been promoting coordinated efforts between government, private sector, and community networks, as well as the academia, to strengthen women's role and participation in STEM, starting from cultivating an interest in STEM during childhood and school years, acquiring the education and skills required for a STEM career to increase the number of women in the STEM workforce, and the last one, promoting career progression in STEM with women as managers and leaders, both in companies, organizations, and in small, medium enterprises. In parallel, the ministry also strengthened the roles and participation of our children throughout the country. For example, through developing the Child Forum, or we call Forum Anak, established from village up to national levels. We gave them two roles, which are children as champions and children as rapporteurs, because in total, they are 32% of our total population. We improved their capacities so that they could take crucial roles in the future. Furthermore, during this year ASEAN leadership, Indonesia will also strengthen the ASEAN gender mainstreaming effort through a number of initiatives and support for the implementation of the ASEAN Gender Mainstreaming Strategic Framework 2021-2025. The strategic framework is designed to address the low number of women labor participation in the region, including the role of technology that disadvantages women in the labor market given the digital gender divide, expose women to harassment and abuse, and perpetuate biases given the lack of representation of women in the technology and STEM sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I would like to reiterate my 2 points regarding the role of women in net zero economy. First, it is critical to consider both climate mitigation and climate adaptation as part of net zero transition, and to increase access and opportunities of women and girls in both climate mitigation and adaptation for future jobs. Secondly, creating women champions in communities are key to ensuring the empowerment of women, children, families, and communities where women live, while preserving and passing on local wisdom to the next generation. For today's discussion, I will leave you something to ponder. As more companies and organizations announce their net zero commitments, we need to remember that there is an opportunity to recognize the intersecting areas of gender and climate. And to reach those commitments, consideration of these intersecting areas become essential to increase women's economic empowerment in order to achieve net zero economy and outcomes. I wish you a fruitful discussion and thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure to meet you all at the Southeast Asia Development Symposium 2023, which highlights various aspects of energy transition in the region. And I'm very happy to host this session with our wonderful panel that will discuss the human aspect of energy transition, which is one of the most important part of the energy transition. Net zero transition in the region will not only require a significant increase in investment and infrastructure, but also substantial improvement of quality human resources. As we have heard from Ibu Leni and also Veronica, that it is critical for us to build new skills in which people can adopt the renewables. Because to adopt the renewables, it takes, we need skills to implement the technology, the entrepreneurship, to make sure a smooth energy transition. And this is not an easy task, and our panel today will share their experience and their work in how they build the human capital necessary for the energy transition. So I will directly go to our panelists. First, actually, we have Shaheen Chuktai, the Regional Advocacy and Campaigns Director for Asia from Save the Children, who's joining us online. But do we have Shaheen online? Okay. While waiting for Shaheen, we also have Dini Indrawati Septiani, the Indonesian Director of Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, or AVPN. Welcome, Ibu Dini. We also have Maria Ralik, Google Org Lead at Google Asia Pacific. We also have Pratik Hegde, Asia Pacific COO of Generation Org. And we also have Julia Marson, Strategy and Partnership Director at Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, or ERIA. Welcome, Julie. Okay, I think we can, should we wait for Shaheen? Should we wait for Shaheen online? Yeah, we can, okay, move on, okay. Okay, to begin our discussion, I will ask the following question to all of you. Globally and across Asia, there's a growing recognition that we need to speed up efforts to achieve net zero. How do you think we can build the human capital needed for a low carbon economy at speed and in inclusive manner? Maybe we can start from Dini. Yeah.
Thank you, SDC. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. Before I start, I would like to say thank you to ADB for inviting AVPN and also High Excellency Ibu Lani and really familiar faces here sitting together at the same panel. I think I'm sure that we will giving all of you giving also thoughtful, insightful sessions this afternoon. So back to your questions. Firstly, I believe that it's really important to us to understand and agree that sustainability and inclusivity should be achieved by all sectors of businesses by setting, a path to a resilient and green and inclusive approach. So, and with a tremendous potential for new, decent, and inclusive job in the shift to a low carbon economy, a coordinated collaborations between all stakeholders to address skill and also knowledge required for the transition is therefore really required. So, and then it's more importantly that we also need to see and remove any barriers that may prevent certain groups or, particular marginal communities, women and disabled from participating in the new economy. So, and then, well, of course, that we obviously need to accelerate the educations and also training by providing like a program, that focus on renewable energy and sustainability and other low carbon technology, reskilling and upskilling the human capital that, taking the inclusions lens, as I mentioned before, but coordinated collaborations is actually all the key. So I think, secondly, like by sitting in the middle as the largest social investor network in Asia, so AVPN actually play a very crucial role in facilitating and coordinating that collaborations. So we identify multiple actors who has been, taking great strides by toward engaging with the climate crisis and also, however these actors were engaging with the issue independently, and therefore actually, we coordinate collective actions toward the climate. So through our Climate Pathfinders program, we engage with the decisions makers of philanthropy, organization, and also other grant making in the regions that to build their capacity, to develop and also fundraise and mobilizing the funding side to adopt climate lens and also intersectionalities in their way of giving, and also investing particularly in the area of preparing human capital for sustainable future. So additionally, actually, we also see the need to engage with the implementation side. So through multiple engagement or initiatives that were supported by our members, we support impact organizations that, to scale and build their organizational skill and also from building from building the woman-led social enterprises to being investment ready, and also to support scale up the non-profit organizations, for the climate innovations. So as has been announced earlier this morning by Michaela Browning, that we are very grateful for the support from Google.org and also ADB for our recent initiative that called APAC Sustainability Seed Fund. So through the fund, we support like 13 sustainability innovators to scale up their technology lead solutions in the regions. So as these grantees leverage technology like AI or machine learning to address issues like biodiversity loss, like decarbonizations, like waste management and other pressing issues. So major part of their work also to scaling up and also give a technical assistance to the local communities that they serve to. So and I believe that it helps build the human capital for the low carbon economy. So this initiative actually as a great example for public and private organizations to come together, in the shared responsibility to work toward climate and sustainability solutions. And also it's going to be exciting to see more coordinated collaborations to prepare human capital for the future jobs, especially maybe for women and girls. So, and more importantly, to see more collective actions to tackle the climate crisis. Thank you, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Dini. That's very interesting. So, strong collaboration, strong partnerships from donors up to the right communities, to the right groups of innovators. That's one of the way how we can accelerate the energy transition. So next, maybe we can go to Shaheen. I'm sorry, Pratik.
Yeah, feels great to be among this esteemed panel. Before I respond to the question, it's actually a very difficult question to answer. But let me place that in the context of the work we do at Generation. Generation is a global not-for-profit. We are working across 17 countries. We work with individuals who face significant barriers to employment. We work with them, we train and reskill people into jobs that are in demand in the market, and we connect them with opportunities by working with employers in those areas. How can we develop human capital required for net zero transition? And I think I would begin by looking at some of the lessons that we have seen very recently when everyone was talking about developing talent for digital transformation, right? So a few years ago, digital jobs were only in IT sector, and today every job is almost a digital job. And I think the first thing that we noticed is identifying the skills and identifying the job role redesign that will be needed in order to go from the current state to the state that we are all aspiring to. I think that's the first thing. We cannot prepare human capital without knowing what skills and what attributes will be required or will be in demand when we make the transition. So that's number one. The second one is access to skilling. And access to skilling is easier said than done because number one, we have very traditional institutions that were designed for a world where one would go to university and have a pretty linear career, which is not the case anymore. All of us are going to have maybe 2 or 3 different careers in our work lifetime. And hence, it's important to reinvent how education and skilling will be designed and made available to people from all backgrounds. That's the second one. That's the most important one, in my opinion. That's where Generation is working across governments in the countries that we're operating in, as well as philanthropic donors, to build capability of existing universities and polytechnics and other vocational training ecosystems. And number three, it's important that the employers, companies recognize the value of investing in skilling. In fact, they invest in skilling before the transition actually happens. Two things happen, right, when there's a transition. Number one, people who are currently employed, the workers, most likely many of them may lose their jobs because their skills will go obsolete. Number two, there will be new jobs created and where the skill gap is so high that you're not able to find the talent. So first of all, I think the companies can look at what are those areas or what are the job roles of today that are at high risk of transformation or high risk of going obsolete, and begin upskilling those workers into those job roles that we all want them to be working in, right? And in the morning, we talked about coal miners being displaced from their work. So how do we really train these coal miners into jobs that can contribute positively to the net zero economy? Second one is to also move the hiring practices of employers, because I think traditionally employers have been looking at traditional qualifications or certifications in order to assess candidates. But in order to make this human development inclusive, we need to move away from the traditional understanding and rediscover what meritocracy really means and what kind of skills and competencies and how do you measure them in a recruitment process, so we are able to give opportunities for those people who may not traditionally make the cut in terms of their resume or CV, but have the right skills to contribute to the sector. So that's sort of how Generation.org looks at the solutions.
Okay, that's really great ideas, Pratik. Thank you. Okay, Maria, what's your take on this?
Thank you so much, Adesti and ADB and everyone here in the room, but also online. Thank you for joining. Well, I can just agree with my fellow panelists. I think I would definitely agree that this is a challenging, well, a question, but also situation. We need to think collectively, what is it that we can do as individuals, as companies, as nonprofits, as governments. We can only address this if we work together. There is no other solution. So Pratik talked about some of the jobs that will be lost. There will be definitely jobs that will be created. What I will add is that there are currently jobs that will need to be transformed. So these jobs will remain there, but we will need new skills in order to remain qualified for this labor market. So we are talking about, just to step back, we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. And the revolution that brings so many opportunities such as artificial intelligence, robotics, computer science education. We also talked about STEM education for women, for girls, for everyone else. So there is a world full of new opportunities. But we also know, as my fellow panelists talked about, we also know that while there are so many of these opportunities are not going to be available to everyone. So we are talking on one hand about jobs and these three groups of jobs. One, that will be lost. Two, that will be transformed. And three, that will be created. It was an interesting fact that I recently found that more than 80% of the jobs that will be created in 2030 haven't been invented yet. World Economic Forum predicts that 50% of current employees, that half of us here and online, we need to be reskilled. So as my fellow panelist also pointed out rightly, it's very important for us to know what are those skills. So reskilling, upskilling, that is not new. That has been around for the longest time with every industrial revolution. But now the main question is, what are those skills that people need to learn? What are the jobs in demand? What are the skills in demand? So then we compare those. So I would just highlight some of the things that we are learning from many of the employers. Those skills are not only technical skills. Technology is here to stay, so that's inevitable. But not that all of us need to become engineers and computer scientists. We need to know how to leverage technology in our current jobs, in our new jobs. So what is important? Critical thinking, communication, soft skills, stress management, empathy. I attended one conference recently in Singapore where someone talked about the DICE model, where employers will be looking at hiring people who can actually meet those attributes. D stands for determination. I for insights. C for curiosity. And E for engagement or empathy. So as we are looking at this, it's very important to highlight that while we are living in this fourth industrial revolution, and it's really important to learn new skills. It's not only about technical skills. It's also about building this creativity, curiosity, all of these growth mindset skills and resilience, so then we can continue being part of this economic development and society. So in order for me to summarize, so some of the things that are really important, and especially for the most underserved communities, including women and girls, people with disabilities, micro and small businesses across ASEAN, it's very important to, one, continue with education, training, and skilling. Two, that we continue creating those jobs, and especially those green jobs that are needed for the recovery. Three, that we work together. So we also mentioned public-private partnerships. We can only achieve this if we are working together. I'm going to pause here. Thank you.
Okay, that's great, Maria. And yeah, it's actually, so we have many fundamental problems actually to speed up or accelerate energy transition, let alone that we have to think about the women and girls who are already sort of like, as Ibu Leni has already mentioned with the statistics, they're already left behind basically in the labor market, the existing labor market. So, okay, Julia, maybe you can continue. And maybe what can we do so that, yeah, nobody left behind, especially women and girls. Yeah.
I think that we touched upon already too many issues related to inclusion and sustainability, even during the plenary session earlier today. And why? I think the reason is that we really need to start to see inclusion and sustainability as two very highly interconnected issues, like, you know, the two sides of the same coin. And that's essentially because if we shape a green transformation that is not inclusive enough, you know, if the green transformation remains something for hipstery people sipping coffee in cool cafes, we are really missing a big opportunity. And we are already starting, we will see increasingly backlashes from groups of the population that feel left behind. The green transformation is not for us. The green transformation is basically forcing me to be unemployed and maybe change job, and maybe I don't want to change job because I don't have so many skills. So this is really important. Once again, if the green future is not an inclusive future, the green transformation will be slowed down. So it's really an imperative. And again, these are patterns that we are seeing already in both emerging and developed economies. So it's something that we should conceive and define together if we want to advance faster. So I think this is really, really important to keep in mind. And that is why, once again, so many of the keynote speakers refer to the just transition, not leaving anyone behind. We know that certain groups, and you mentioned them already, women, girls, people with disability are not benefiting equally. So this is something that I think is very, very important to keep in mind for all of us in this room and joining us online. And why skills? We are focusing on skills because skills are at the center of any inclusive transformation. Skills are a fundamental vehicle to empower individuals and to make them on board in these different journeys. And thank you also for many of the fellow panelists to talk not only about the green transformation, but also about the digital revolution. Again, these are big, big changes undergoing in our economies and societies, and we should find a way to couple them and make these opportunities for as many people as possible. So once again, skills are absolutely at the center, and we should think about, first of all, thinking about skilling and reskilling throughout every education cycle, from primary education to higher education or even postgraduates. But we should not just confine skills for the green transformation or the digital transformation to universities. It's something that really needs to start from the very, very early education cycles, because it's such a big transformation endeavor. And finally, let me echo what something has just been said. I could not agree more about the fact that we should also consider skills for the digital and green transformation in a very broad way. We need creativity, we need entrepreneurship, not just by starting a new company, but becoming entrepreneurial. Because these are very big transformations in society, we need to equip people with those skills that are very versatile. You mentioned, we don't know yet what the future jobs will be. So we need to make sure that people know how to learn to be able to reskill and upskill autonomously. This is absolutely key for our society and for this transformation we are talking about today. And I'm going to stop here.
Yeah, that's a very, very lovely end to our first session. I think now we can move on to our second round of discussion. Okay, I'm going to shake the questions, the order of questions a little bit. Maybe I will go to Julia again. Julia, you have been one of the leading forces behind the establishment of the ASEAN Entrepreneurship Startup Innovation Knowledge Lab that focuses on ASEAN and its dialogue partners. Can you tell us more about this initiative and how innovation and entrepreneurship work together in energy transition?
Thank you for this question. It gives me an opportunity to tell the audience a little bit more about what we are doing at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Yes, it's true. We started to do more work about entrepreneurship, startups, and innovation ecosystems at large. And even here, the issue of skills is absolutely key. But because ASEAN is so dynamic when it comes to startup creation and innovation, I really think that this will become one of the global innovation hotspots in the world. And I have been analyzing innovation ecosystem in many, many, many different regions around the world. But I really believe that this region is so unique, so diverse, so interesting to study. Well, for many of these reasons, we actually decided to go even bigger. So please stay tuned and remain connected with us, because we will soon launch a new area center for digital innovation and sustainability. So more information yet to come. Many of us will be involved in this center. Please, I cannot reveal too many information as of now. I don't want to spoil too much surprises, but remain connected with us, because there will be many opportunities to collaborate on this issue in the future. Well, with our work, of course, we want to support innovation ecosystems and the various actors composing these ecosystems, education institutions, the policymakers, of course, the entrepreneurship community, the entrepreneurs themselves. But at the same time, we also want to focus on those innovators that are actually paying attention and actually developing business model for good, for sustainability, but also for inclusion. So we had the privilege to interact with many entrepreneurs in the region that are actually putting sustainability and inclusion at the center of their business models. And actually, many of these entrepreneurs are women entrepreneurs. Again, I don't want to reveal too much because I think that we will get some surprises during the reception at the end of our day of discussions. But we partner with ADB to actually showcase some of these women-led enterprises that are really working for a more sustainable future, whether in the textile industry, for instance, by going for a no chemical dicing textile methodologies, by even reusing very traditional Indonesian techniques, wonderful techniques, or other companies that are working with plastic pickers in large Indonesian cities, and they're using these plastics to actually produce very nice products. And some of these companies, and again, this brings us back to the topic of today, they put skills at the center. So they're even reinvesting some of the revenues that they're generating to train and retrain and upskill their workers, for instance, women weavers in rural Indonesia, to make them more productive and generate more revenue for the future that again can be reinvested by generating this positive cycle. Or in the case of this company working with plastic pickers, they dedicate funding to train the kids of these plastic pickers so that they can have a better future. So looking at the new and younger generations. So this is the type of entrepreneurship we also want to showcase and promote, because again, it's a clear and tangible examples of the fact that you can still make money, but at the same time, fully embracing the transformation that we want to see. And again, my last point to address your question, I think this is also showing us there's a huge market opportunity, especially in this region. Someone before me has already mentioned the data from the World Economic Forum. Well, the World Economic Forum is projected that 75% of consumers by 2025 will be either millennial or Gen Z consumers in this region. And across Asia more in general, not just in ASEAN, 50% of the population will soon be part of these two cohorts. And why these cohorts are so important? That's because they are putting, as consumers, sustainability at the center, sustainability and inclusion. Lots of surveys, sentiment analysis, and so on and so forth are telling us that these younger generations are ready to spend more for more sustainable products and services. So this generational shift, this growing pocket of consumers that are so interested in these issues are also telling us that there's certainly a market opportunity out there. And so there's even more, the case for this kind of better entrepreneurship. And I'm going to stop here.
Okay, thank you, Julia. So many brilliant ideas from the Innovation Lab. Okay, next maybe I'm going to go to Pratik. Pratik, with Generation.org, you oversee future skills development programs in Singapore and also in the region. How can education, skilling, upskilling, and reskilling process be accelerated in Asia? And most importantly, to make it inclusive?
Again, difficult question to answer in a quick span of time. So I think the first thing that we're seeing is for skilling to work at scale, we need the nexus of industry, training providers, and government to operate in a seamless way. One of the challenges across ASEAN countries that we've noticed is a lot of these, I would say, stakeholders of the education to employment ecosystem operate individually, fairly fragmented. So there's maybe a training institution just focuses on training, right? Or maybe industry doesn't essentially engage with the training institution the same way they should. So I think the first thing is really to build this nexus and make sure that this nexus works better. I think one of the really good example is what government of Singapore announced recently called a job skills integrator. So that's actually a role, it's a fairly innovative idea where they're creating an integrator which works across the people, the training ecosystem, as well as the industry, and brings them together to create solutions that will link skilling to employment. So that's the first thing, right? The second is in terms of inclusion, it's important to think of access to skilling in a more holistic way. So something that we've realized as we're serving a lot of, in Singapore especially, we have a program called She Employed, where we are serving women from low-income backgrounds. And for them, access to skilling is so complicated that, number one, there's opportunity cost. If you are underemployed or you may be working at a low-wage job, then you need to forego that in order to skill. And there is a component of opportunity cost in most skilling, even if you are skilling people who are already employed. The second, women especially face other challenges where they have childcare responsibilities or other caregiving responsibilities to be taken care. So often, skilling kind of goes below on the priority order, even though it is something that everyone recognizes will give them a better future. And so we're running this program funded by Standard Chartered Foundation, where we are able to work with women and build women from low-income communities and build flexible learning programs for them. That can offer them, flexibility of when they learn, how they learn, as well as offering them some, stipends during the learning period to offset some of the childcare expenses. Now, I quote this example because I think this is also a way for governments to think about how to build policies that are more inclusive and also allow incentives or offer incentives for job seekers to take up skilling, much more widely. Lastly, I think I mentioned this earlier about inclusive hiring practices, and I think that is something that we have seen change quite significantly in the last 1 year, especially in the digital job role landscape. Today a lot more digital certifications are being valued in the recruitment process than somebody's education degree or where they studied. And we see this trend to hopefully, go beyond just digital roles as well, where you're looking at someone's competence and demonstration of the skills as a primary way of hiring people rather than relying on just a resume or other traditional means. We work with a lot of employers to make this happen, and it's obviously a very difficult task for, say, convincing hiring managers to consider non-traditional profiles. And I think this can also, something that will inform policymakers where how can they probably offer wage subsidies selectively for certain, profile of job seekers so that they can actually get a chance. Many a times we hear that once the hiring managers take a chance on someone who's from a non-traditional background, they're often quite happy with a lot of other things, a lot of other skills and competencies that they bring, which otherwise hasn't even been accounted for in the recruiting process. And so it's important to educate more employers and work with the employers more closely to redesign the hiring processes in addition to just skilling. And that's how we can actually link skilling to job creation and job connection overall in terms of accelerating this change in ASEAN. So that's
Okay. Thank you, Pratik. So let's not forget the policymakers here, because good policies create good opportunities, I guess. Now we can, I will go to Dini. Dini, can you tell us about AVPN's work on gender and equality, and what is actually needed to direct investment toward a gender and socially inclusive transition in the net zero?
Thank you. At AVPN, we see gender as intersectionalities. So it's not gender is not a woman issue, so it is a human issue. So in many challenges, in many challenges that we are facing today, women and girls are often affected in many, while they are in a crucial role in creating solutions as well. So for example, like gender equity can accelerate solutions for many other areas like healthcare and nutrition, economic empowerment, education, and livelihoods. So when 10% more girls go to school, is actually is a country GDPs on average increased by 3%. So similarly, like maternal and like newborn death will be reduced more than 70% if we give access to women to get like high quality of healthcare. So I believe that this gender equality can accelerate solutions and transitions to the net zero too. So, but however, like social investment does not currently reflect in the reality. So, for example, like as of 2018 to 2019, so there's over 75% of private aids in Asia lack of considerations of gender. So, so it is therefore it's very crucial to change the system of philanthropy and impact investing, where gender equality is often funded as a silo team. So, given the most pressing needs for gender equality in Asia, combined with the missions and goals of AVPN gender equality platform members, AVPN actually uniquely positioned as, as a social investment network to advance economic empowerment for women and girls. So we actually, within this team, we have identified three main areas which, give together a holistic approach, like access to finance, care economy, and also women in leadership. So we are committed to driving a new brand of Asia philanthropy that can be more rewarding, more effective, and also be more successful. So enabling a system where funders and grantees can start the relationship approached by the place that they can trust, humility, transparency, and also on how they want to learn and grow together for the specific, issue like this net zero. So when it comes to direct investment toward a gender and also socially inclusive transitions to net zero, I would like to share an example where in 2022, together with our philanthropy leaders, we mobilize capitals to increasing access to learning of the STEAM learning opportunities for women and girls as well. So we are targeting girls like below 18 years old, like coming from low-income families and also disadvantaged group in Asia Pacific. So I think STEAM is one of the key leverage that can help women and girls, to take on the green jobs. So by making sure that women and girls that we support, can have access to the STEAM learning. So we make sure that the investment we can investing in more inclusive transitions to net zero as well. So while we also continue to contribute collaborations to invest on the gender lens investing, we inviting our high net worth individual across the regions to be together on our called Asia Gender Network. So bringing them together, and also because we believe that among this network, so people can collaborate and they can, supporting toward the same issues, it can make a very impactful effort. So I think because of this, I think everyone believes that investing in gender is not only the right thing to do, but also the smart thing to do in these days. Thank you.
Thank you, Dini. Okay, so next one. This is the what we've been waiting for. One of our panelists was joining online, Shaheen Chuktai, the Regional Advocacy and Campaigns Director for Asia at Save the Children, is already here. Hello, Shaheen.
Hello.
Hello. It's lovely to meet you. It's a bit, it's a bit late. Yeah. Okay. So Shaheen, we're already in our second session. So I would like to ask you. You provide strategic leadership to Save the Children International on issues including education and climate crisis. Can you tell us more about your work to open spaces for children and young people to speak up and lead the climate action and just energy transition?
Sure. Thank you very much. And let me briefly say it's a pleasure to join this interesting discussion, and apologies for the technical issue that prevented me from joining earlier. I'd like to say that firstly, it's important that we recognize that young people have been speaking out and doing so very effectively for many years. They've been at the forefront of pushing for greener economies and greener societies through public campaigns and various forms of advocacy. In fact, you can argue that their efforts have helped push the topic of climate change and climate action further up the media and political agenda worldwide. And they've been doing so much more effectively, one could argue, in the past 10 years than the efforts of hundreds of traditional environmental and development organizations have done in the past half century or so. So those kinds of efforts, and I'm talking about things like the school strikes, I'm talking about the various kinds of protests that have taken place, around the world, but also the very important lobbying that many high-profile and less well-known youth activists have undertaken for many years. All of those efforts inspired us at Save the Children. Now, Save the Children has long conducted its own advocacy and campaigns to address a range of humanitarian and development issues. And as part of that, we have supported children and older youth to campaign and advocate on issues that particularly concern them, including increasingly the climate emergency. And this typically includes supporting young people's participation in policymaking processes and public discussions and forums. For example, just yesterday, Save Children co-hosted a side event collaborating with our UN partners and other international NGO partners at a side event that was linked to the annual gatherings and discussions organized by the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific, UNESCAP. And that was taking place in Bangkok this month. And at this side event, which focused on children's rights and their access to water resources, we were able to facilitate a dialogue between youth advocates, development experts, and politicians and officials from various countries, including the Philippines and Nepal. So those are some of the types of activities that we're able to support. But we also know that the challenge of global heating requires a whole of society response. And so we feel it's important to support children and youth to communicate with public audiences through mass media, including social media. Now, this approach was particularly useful during the peak years of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in 2020 and 21, to some extent in 22 as well. And during this time, because of the various risks and restrictions on people's movement, that meant that young advocates found their ability to communicate their concerns to public audiences and to policymakers were much more difficult, if not impossible. And so we wanted to support the activism of young people that we'd seen as being so effective in the years before that pandemic. So that inspired us to go beyond inviting young people to events, physical events, or even making videos for social media. So we made an effort to help children and youth to come together and design and lead their own campaigns, working with other young people, both within their countries, but also joining forces with like-minded youth in other countries so they could tackle what is essentially a transnational problem. So for us, this gave birth to something called the Red Alert campaign, which is now active in 7 countries in Asia, with more that are due to join soon. And this is a model where children and youth have their own leadership. They lead it, They design their own action plans, and then they implement those plans with some support from Save the Children. So this child and youth-led approach has proved very successful in raising public awareness and influencing policies in various contexts. I think because it creates an autonomous space for these young people. It allows them to harness their own determination, their energy, and to steer their own authentic efforts to promote climate action. So they're fighting for their future, and the world needs them to win that fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaheen. Social media is indeed very powerful, especially to give the voice of to the voiceless. And in this case, it's for the youth who has their own strong opinions. And I think that they could be the major force behind the climate action and also the energy transition. Lovely to finally have you here, Shaheen. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
For the final part of our second round of discussion, Maria. Maria, you manage Google's philanthropic work across Asia Pacific to support nonprofits using technology to tackle global challenges. How are technology and philanthropy can go together to support actions toward net zero across ASEAN?
So short answer is they cannot go without each other. But just step back for a second. So Google.org is Google's philanthropy. So it's the philanthropic arm of Google. And as you rightly pointed out, so our vision is simple. It's to support many of these actually nonprofit organizations that are today with us with 3 of our resources. And we do that to the 3 resources are our philanthropic funding, our technology, and our volunteers. And we do that in areas where we believe we can be most helpful, in areas such as economic contribution, helping underserved job seekers or micro and small businesses, mainly when led by women in many of these areas. And then as people come online, and we saw that, for example, 40 million people in 2020 in Southeast Asia came online for the very first time. So now 70% of the Southeast Asian region is online. Many of these people came online for the first time. So how we can help them to learn how to stay safe online and be more media literate. People like parents and children and youth and etc. And then the third area is sustainability. So supporting nonprofits such as AVPN to support other organizations who are interested in leveraging technology to address various sustainability challenges. So with that, when we talk about supporting the underserved communities, so who are those underserved communities that we are trying to support so they are not left behind even further? The first one is small and medium enterprises, right? So across Southeast Asia, actually, 80% of workforce, they're contributing to 80% of the workforce and more than 50% of the region's GDP. However, many of them have been impacted during the pandemic. The second one, Julia and others mentioned job seekers, Pratik as well. So, and especially those young people who are looking for jobs. But not only people who are looking for their first job. We heard also that many people lost their jobs during pandemic. So how they can also learn new skills, as Julia mentioned, but also unlearn some of the skills. So then they can be able to absorb new skills to help them remain relevant for the labor market. So from our side, a couple of examples that I will offer, and especially talking about technology. Our approach is that we'll listen to the nonprofit organizations who are experts on the ground, and they tell us what are the challenges that the underserved communities are facing in their countries, in their regions. As someone who was part of the nonprofit world many moons ago, I also understand that really, as a nonprofit, it's sometimes hard and challenging to get the right resources, funding, technology, learn how to use technology. One of our grantees, who is also in the audience here, Info Exchange, has conducted this survey with nonprofits across the region, asking them, what are your challenges with technology? And some of the data is that 1 in 2 says that they don't have any digital transformation plan in place. However, many of them are being hacked. On another hand, we are also learning from them that they want to learn how to use digital tools online. And I'm not only talking about basic technology, but also more advanced technology. So speaking about more advanced technology, one example of how a small nonprofit here in Indonesia can leverage artificial intelligence to reduce plastic. I hope that many of you have heard of the organization Grigo Foundation here in Indonesia. They're one of our winning organizations of the AI for Social Impact Challenge that was supported a couple of years ago. They had this amazing idea to reduce plastic with artificial intelligence here in Bali. They reached out to us, and with the support of not only our philanthropic funding, but also technology, TensorFlow, and our volunteers, they created this app that helped them not only to hire some of the waste pickers locally, but also they improved the recycling by 35% in Bali. So not only that they are leveraging technology to create this new solution that helps them, but also they are employing new people. Some of these people are women in Bali, and they're scaling that model. So that is just one of the examples. Dini here from AVPN talked about the APEC Sustainability Seed Fund that we supported, that Michaela Browning from our team also announced earlier today. So 13 organizations across 12 countries are inspiring organizations that are leveraging technology that will be addressing many of the sustainability challenges across Asia Pacific. So to summarize and to make the final point before we play the video, our approach is inclusive by design, and we always try to listen to these nonprofit organizations and try to help them. Usually, they're helping women, people with disabilities, indigenous communities. And to give you one of the examples, and for all of us to hear from one of those wonderful stories, micro and small business here in Indonesia, who was one of the beneficiaries of our grantee, a Youth Business International, who created a rapid response and recovery program to support and upskill MSMEs across APAC in many countries. So you can hear from her directly through the video if we can play it now.
Pokoknya bikin ekonomi saya hancur, penyakit ganas yang bikin saya nggak bisa kemana-mana, nggak bisa jualan juga.
Jadi saya dagang basreng karena dia bisa sekali goreng bisa untuk beberapa hari ke depan saya bisa stok.
Soalnya kan orang mungkin ya buat jajan aja susah kali ya Pak. Kadang mikirinnya buat makan aja dulu deh gitu. Yang saya dapetin ilmu dari pelajaran YCAB, YBI, Google, itu soal dagang ya. Dagang, terus packaging, terus pemasaran, terus ngasih tahu tentang kayak nge-share di ini foto.
Kita ketik ada nama saya jualan apa di situ, alamat saya. Pokoknya bikin ekonomi saya hancur, penyakit ganas yang bikin saya nggak bisa kemana-mana, nggak bisa jualan juga.
Jadi saya dagang basreng karena dia bisa sekali goreng bisa untuk beberapa hari ke depan saya bisa stok.
Soalnya kan orang mungkin ya buat jajan aja susah kali ya Pak. Kadang mikirinnya buat makan aja dulu deh gitu. Yang saya dapetin ilmu dari pelajaran YCAB, YBI, Google, itu soal dagang ya. Dagang, terus packaging, terus pemasaran, terus ngasih tahu tentang kayak nge-share di ini foto.
Kita ketik ada nama saya jualan apa di situ, alamat saya juga ada, nomor WA saya juga ada gitu. Live ini kan seminggu juga 3 kali ya, jadi masih banyak lah waktu buat keluarga, terutama ya kerjaan saya juga sebagai ibu rumah tangga juga.
Ya mudah-mudahan kedepannya saya bisa punya ruko atau punya rumah sendiri nggak ngontrak Pak.
Harapan saya dan impian saya pengen punya toko, punya nama, dan jadi bos. Pengennya gitu. Harapan saya dan impian saya.
Yeah, I think we have arrived at the very end of our sessions. I would like to give a recap, a very small recap actually. So energy transition together with digital revolution have many challenges because it requires us to learn new skills. It requires new jobs, some of which don't exist at the moment. But it actually creates opportunities because during the journey to net zero, it's actually shaking the establishment, challenges to educate, to upskill and reskill. So many rooms actually for collaboration, for partnerships, even for the marginalized groups, including more opportunities for women and girls. We just need to amplify the partnerships, the collaboration, and brilliant ideas, innovation, as our panelists have mentioned, will bloom during the process. So thank you, ADB and all partners to arrange this session. Let's have a big applause to our panelists.